Hey there, how's it going? Thanks for joining me today. Whether you're relaxing at home, on your commute, or winding down for the evening, I'm really glad you're here. Now, I want you to imagine something for a second. You're floating in the ocean, maybe diving for lobsters like you've done hundreds of times before. The water's crystal clear off Cape Cod. The sun's streaming down through the waves, and everything feels perfectly normal. Then suddenly, and I mean suddenly, everything goes black. Not dark, black, like someone just turned off the lights on the entire world. That's exactly what happened to Michael Packard on June 11th, 2021. One second he's 35 feet underwater doing his job. The next second he's inside the mouth of a 40-foot humpback whale. And here's the thing that'll blow your mind. He lived to tell about it. 40 seconds. That's how long Michael spent inside that whale's mouth before being spit out alive. Gasping and disoriented, but very much breathing. When his story hit the news, people couldn't believe it. I mean, come on, swallowed by a whale and surviving. That sounds like something out of Pinocchio, right? But here's what's absolutely fascinating about Michael's story. It confirms something that sailors have been whispering about for centuries. Something that sounds so impossible, so utterly terrifying, that most people just assumed it was maritime folklore. You can actually be swallowed by a whale and live through it. Now, before you start crossing ocean swimming off your bucket list, let me share something that'll make you feel a bit better. Most whales, and I'm talking about the vast majority of them, physically cannot swallow you. Think about that for a second. The blue whale, which is hands down the largest animal that has ever existed on our planet, has a throat that's only 4 to 8 inches wide. 4 to 8 inches! That's barely bigger than a grapefruit. Picture this massive creature, longer than 3 school buses lined up end to end, weighing as much as 30 elephants. And its throat is smaller than the opening of a basketball hoop. It's like having a fire hose connected to a drinking straw. All that incredible size, all that power, and it can barely swallow something bigger than a fish. But, and this is where things get interesting, not all whales are built the same way. A sperm whale's throat, 20 inches wide. 20 inches. That's plenty wide enough for a human body to fit through. Plenty wide enough to turn that impossible nightmare into a very real possibility. You know what's wild about this? We're talking about 3 completely different types of whale mouths here, each one engineered by evolution for totally different purposes. It's like nature decided to experiment with 3 different approaches to being an ocean giant. And each one came with its own terrifying implications for any human unlucky enough to end up in the wrong place at the wrong time. First, you've got the filter feeders. These are whales like blues and humpbacks, the ones with baleen plates instead of teeth. Now, baleen is made of keratin, the same stuff as your fingernails. But imagine your fingernails grew into long, flexible curtains hanging from the roof of your mouth. These curtains work like the ultimate fishing net, trapping millions upon millions of tiny prey. We're talking about krill, small fish, anything bite-sized that gets caught in nature's most efficient strainer. When a humpback whale, like the one that swallowed Michael, opens its mouth to feed, it's not trying to grab one big meal. It's trying to engulf an entire cloud of food, thousands of gallons of water containing millions of tiny creatures. The whale's throat expands like a massive accordion, and then it squeezes all that water back out through the baleen plates. What's left behind? Lunch. But imagine being caught in that process. You're suddenly surrounded by thousands of gallons of rushing water pressed against these curtains of baleen in complete and utter darkness. The whale doesn't even know you're there. You're just something that got caught in the net by accident. Then you have the suction specialists. These are whales like the beaked whales, and they've perfected something that sounds like science fiction. They create negative pressure in their mouths, basically turning their entire head into a giant vacuum cleaner. The suction is so powerful it can collapse the lungs of their prey before they even know what hit them. Picture being near one of these whales when it decides to feed. One second you're swimming normally, the next second you're being pulled toward this massive mouth by a force you can't fight against. The water around you starts moving faster and faster, and you realize with growing horror that you're not swimming anymore. you're being sucked in, and finally, you have the hunters. Sperm whales, orcas. These are the ones with teeth. Not little teeth either. We're talking about teeth the size of wine bottles, lined up in jaws that can snap shut with over 4,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. 4,000 psi? To put that in perspective, a human bite maxes out at around 200 psi. These whales could crack concrete with their jaws. Now here's where things get really unsettling. Inside any of these whale mouths, you're dealing with conditions that are absolutely hostile to human life. The darkness isn't just dark, it's absolute. No light has ever reached these places. Your eyes, no matter how much they adjust, will show you nothing but black. The pressure is crushing, literally crushing. At just 20 feet underwater, water pressure doubles compared to the surface. But inside a feeding whale's mouth, with thousands of gallons of water rushing around, that pressure can spike even higher. Your eardrums, which are built to handle the gentle pressure changes we experience on land, will rupture at just 3 atmospheres. Inside a whale's mouth, you could be dealing with 20 atmospheres or more, and the temperature. Most people think the ocean is cold, and they're right. But inside a whale's mouth, you're dealing with body temperature 97 degrees Fahrenheit. That might not sound too bad until you realize you're surrounded by nearly 100% humidity and toxic gases from partially digested fish. It's like being trapped inside a biological sauna, filled with the worst possible air you could imagine. Speaking of air, and this is crucial, whatever you're breathing in there isn't really air at all. It's a cocktail of methane, carbon dioxide, and hydrogen sulfide from decomposing fish. One breath of this mixture would make most people violently sick. The problem is, when you're panicking and your heart is racing, your body desperately wants to breathe. Every instinct you have is screaming at you to take in air, but that air could kill you faster than the water could. Michael Packard described the smell as the worst thing he'd ever experienced. Imagine the most rotten fish you've ever encountered. Multiply that by 1,000, mix in some swamp gas, and you're starting to get close. And remember, this is happening in complete darkness, under crushing pressure, while you're trying not to drown and not to breathe poison at the same time. But here's what really gets me about Michael's story. He wasn't just some random person who got incredibly unlucky. Michael was an experienced commercial lobster diver who had been working these waters for decades. He knew the risks. He understood the ocean. He'd probably seen whales before and given them plenty of space. But sometimes, despite all your experience and all your precautions, the ocean reminds you just how small you really are. When that humpback whale engulfed him, Michael later said his first thought wasn't about dying, it was about his kids. He thought about his wife, about all the things he'd never get to say to them. And then, somewhere in that darkness, his training kicked in. Instead of panicking completely, instead of thrashing around and making things worse, he started pushing against the whale's mouth, trying to make himself as uncomfortable as possible for his unwilling host. And you know what? It worked. After 40 seconds, that probably felt like 40 minutes, the whale surfaced and opened its mouth. Michael shot to the surface like a cork from a champagne bottle, gasping and choking, but alive. His crew pulled him out of the water, and he lived to become one of the very few people who can honestly say they've been inside a whale's mouth and survived to tell the story. But Michael's story isn't unique just because he survived. It's unique because it happened in the modern era, with witnesses, with people who could verify what happened. Throughout history, there have been stories, legends really, of people being swallowed by whales and living through it. Most of them were dismissed as sailors' tales, as the kind of stories that grow bigger and more impossible with each telling. But now, we know better. Now we know that the ocean's most gentle giants, the filter-feeding whales that mostly ignore humans completely, can accidentally turn someone's normal day into the stuff of nightmares. And more importantly, we're starting to understand exactly what happens inside those mouths. what the human body goes through during those terrifying moments, and why some people survive while others don't. The thing is, this isn't just about one man's incredible experience off Cape Cod. This is about understanding some of the most magnificent creatures on our planet. Creatures that have been swimming in our oceans for millions of years, long before humans ever dreamed of venturing into their world. It's about the delicate balance between fear and fascination that defines our relationship with these giants. Because here's the truth, whales don't want to swallow humans. We're not on their menu. We're not even close to being on their menu. When a whale, like the one that grabbed Michael, opens its mouth to feed, it's following instincts that have been refined over millions of years of evolution. It's looking for krill, for small schooling fish, for the tiny creatures that make up the vast majority of ocean life. Humans are basically accidents waiting to happen in the whale world. We're too big, too bony, too weird-tasting to be appealing to any whale. But we're also just small enough, just unlucky enough, to occasionally end up in the wrong place at exactly the wrong time. And that's what makes these stories so compelling. They're not really about monster whales hunting humans. They're about the incredible, terrifying, awe-inspiring reality of sharing an ocean with creatures so large that they can accidentally swallow us without even noticing. They're about what happens when two completely different worlds, ours and theirs, collide in the most dramatic way possible. So as we dive deeper into these stories, as we explore the history and science and sheer wonder of whale encounters, remember Michael Packard floating in those dark waters off Cape Cod. Remember that 40 seconds that changed everything he thought he knew about the ocean. Because his story is just the beginning. The ocean holds secrets we're only starting to understand, and some of the most incredible ones involve the giants that call it home. February 20th, 1820. The Pacific Ocean stretches endlessly in every direction, and somewhere in that vast blue wilderness, a Nantucket whaling ship called the Essex is about to become part of history, but not the kind of history anyone wants to be part of. First Mate Owen Chase is standing on deck when he sees it, an 85-foot sperm whale, massive beyond imagination, heading straight for their ship. Now you have to understand something about these old whaling vessels. They were built tough, sure, but they were made of wood and canvas and hope. They weren't designed to take a hit from what amounts to a living battering ram weighing 80 tons. The whale strikes once. The entire ship shudders, timbers groaning like the vessel is crying out in pain. But here's what's absolutely terrifying. The whale doesn't just hit and run. It backs away, almost like it's taking aim, and then it charges again. This time the impact is devastating. The Essex starts taking on water immediately, and Owen Chase realizes with growing horror that they're not just damaged, they're doomed. But it's what Chase sees next that burns into his memory forever. As the whale circles their sinking ship, its massive jaws open wide. Wide enough, Chase later writes, to swallow their whaleboat whole. Think about that for a second. We're talking about a mouth so enormous that it could engulf an entire rowboat, and the men inside it without even trying. This is the moment when whales transform in the human imagination. Before the Essex, whales were just big fish. Dangerous when cornered, sure, but mostly something you hunted for oil and profit. After the Essex, they become something else entirely. They become monsters with intelligence, creatures capable of revenge, giants that could think and plan and strike back at the humans who dared to hunt them. Owen Chase's account of the Essex disaster spreads like wildfire through every port in New England. Sailors gather in taverns to hear the story told and retold, each version growing more terrifying with each telling. And eventually, a young writer named Herman Melville hears these stories and becomes obsessed with them. The Essex disaster becomes the foundation for Moby Dick. But here's what's fascinating. The real story is actually more horrifying than the fiction, because what happened after the whale attack was worse than the attack itself. The Essex survivors found themselves adrift in the Pacific in 3 small boats, thousands of miles from land. They had some supplies, but not nearly enough for the journey ahead. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The sun beat down mercilessly during the day, and the cold cut through them at night. When the food ran out, they started eating leather. When the leather was gone, they ate whatever they could find. And when there was nothing left to eat, they faced a choice that no human being should ever have to make. They drew lots to see who would die so the others could live. The survivors of the Essex, these men who had once been proud whale hunters, ended up resorting to cannibalism to survive. Only 8 men out of 20 made it home alive. And their story, their real story, was so dark and disturbing that it transformed how people thought about whales forever. These weren't just big fish anymore. These were creatures powerful enough to destroy ships, intelligent enough to plan attacks, and terrifying enough to drive civilized men to acts of unspeakable desperation. But the Essex was just the beginning. As whaling expanded across the world's oceans, more and more stories started coming back. Stories that stretched the boundaries of what people could believe. Even after witnessing the Essex disaster, jump forward to 1891, and we meet James Bartley, a harpooner working on a whaling ship called the Star of the East. They're hunting in the South Atlantic when they spot a massive sperm whale, exactly the kind of prize that made careers and fortunes. The boats launch, the chase begins, and everything seems to be going according to plan until it doesn't. The whale turns on Bartley's boat and destroys it completely. One moment James Bartley is standing in the bow with his harpoon ready. The next moment he's gone, just vanished. The other whalers search the debris, but there's no sign of him anywhere. They assume he's drowned, another casualty of the dangerous whaling trade. But 15 hours later, something extraordinary happens. The crew manages to kill the whale and haul it alongside their ship to begin the long process of cutting it up for oil. When they slice open the whale's stomach, they find James Bartley inside. Unconscious, barely breathing, his skin bleached white by stomach acid, but alive. The newspapers go absolutely crazy with the story. Here's a real-life Jonah, they say. A man swallowed by a whale and living to tell about it. The story spreads around the world, and suddenly everyone is talking about James Bartley, the modern miracle, the man who survived the ultimate nightmare. Now here's where things get complicated. Modern historians have spent decades trying to verify Bartley's story, and most of them doubt it actually happened. The records are sketchy, the witnesses are unreliable, and some of the details just don't add up. But here's what they didn't doubt, what they couldn't doubt. Whale stomachs are strange and complicated places where truly bizarre things are possible. A sperm whale's digestive system isn't like ours. They don't have just one stomach. They have multiple chambers, like a biological factory designed to process the strangest meals imaginable. The first chamber alone can hold 3,000 gallons. 3,000 gallons! That's enough space for a small car, or several human beings, or pretty much anything else the whale might accidentally swallow. And here's the really weird part. These stomach chambers can contain air pockets, places where gases from decomposition collect, creating spaces where something could theoretically survive for a short time. Not comfortably, not safely, but possibly long enough to be rescued if everything went exactly right. Whether James Bartley's story is true or not, it captured something important about our relationship with whales. It took the abstract terror of the Essex, the fear of being attacked by a whale, and made it personal. It wasn't just about ships being destroyed anymore. It was about human beings disappearing into these creatures and somehow, impossibly, surviving. But we don't have to rely on questionable 19th century newspaper accounts anymore. We have video evidence. We have modern technology. We have witnesses with cameras. And in June 2019, we got the most incredible whale encounter ever recorded. Rainer Schimpf is a marine photographer, someone who has spent his entire career documenting ocean life. He's photographed sharks, dolphins, rays, pretty much every creature you can imagine. But on this particular day off the coast of South Africa, he's focusing on something truly spectacular, a sardine run. If you've never seen a sardine run, Imagine millions upon millions of small silver fish moving together like a living river through the ocean. It's one of nature's most incredible spectacles, and it attracts predators from throughout the food chain. Dolphins, seals, birds, and whales all converge on these massive schools of fish, creating feeding frenzies that are absolutely mesmerizing to watch. Rainer is in the water with his camera, documenting this incredible event when a bride's whale decides to lunge feed right where he's swimming. Now, bride's whales aren't the biggest whales in the ocean, but they're still massive, up to 50 feet long and weighing 40 tons. When they decide to feed, they accelerate toward their prey with their mouths wide open, engulfing everything in their path. For 3 seconds captured on high-definition video, Rainer Schimpf completely disappears inside the whale's mouth. One moment he's there swimming with his camera, the next moment there's just whale. Then the whale opens its mouth and Rainer shoots out like he's been fired from a cannon. When he surfaces, gasping and disoriented, his wetsuit shows clear tooth marks. The whale's baleen plates had scraped against him as he was pressed against the roof of the mouth. His camera, amazingly, kept recording the entire time, giving us the first ever footage of what it looks like inside a whale's mouth from a human perspective. Rainer's description of those 3 seconds is absolutely chilling. "Everything went dark," he said later. "I felt pressure on my hips. I could feel the whale's tongue underneath me." He knew with crystal clarity that if the whale decided to dive, the pressure would kill him in seconds. If the whale closed its mouth completely, he would suffocate. If the whale tried to swallow, he would be crushed. But somehow the whale realized its mistake. It opened wide and shook its head, and Rainer found himself back in open water, alive and conscious, and trying to process what had just happened to him. He became the first person to be photographed inside a whale's mouth and survive. And his experience gave us unprecedented insight into what these encounters are really like. What's fascinating about Rainer's story is how it confirms what we suspected about accidental whale encounters. The whale didn't try to eat him. It didn't attack him or hunt him down. It was simply feeding, following instincts millions of years old. And Rainer happened to be in exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong time when the whale realized that this wasn't food, when it felt something large and strange and definitely not. Sardine-like in its mouth, it did exactly what any whale would do. It got rid of the foreign object as quickly as possible. Whales have been dealing with inedible items in their mouths for millions of years. Rocks, seaweed, plastic pollution. They're experts at identifying what belongs and what doesn't, but those 3 seconds inside the whale's mouth gave Rainer a glimpse into a world that almost no human has ever experienced. The absolute darkness, the crushing pressure, the overwhelming sense of being completely helpless inside a creature so large that you're nothing more than a minor inconvenience to it. And yet, he survived, just like Michael Packard would. Survived 2 years later off Cape Cod, just like the handful of other people throughout history who have found themselves accidentally swallowed and somehow lived to tell about it. These stories, these incredible encounters, they reveal something important about whales and about ourselves. They show us that the ocean's most magnificent creatures aren't monsters, even though they're capable of things that seem monstrous to us. They're simply trying to survive in their world, just like we're trying to survive in ours, but sometimes in those moments when our 2 worlds collide. When a human being finds themselves inside a whale's mouth, we get a glimpse of something truly extraordinary. We see what it's like to be completely powerless in the face of nature's magnificence. We experience for just a few terrifying seconds what it means to be prey instead of predator. And somehow, incredibly, some people live through it. They come back to our world with stories that seem impossible, experiences that challenge everything we think we know about the ocean and our place in it. They remind us that despite all our technology, all our knowledge, all our attempts to control and understand the natural world, we're still just visitors in the ocean. The whales were there first. They'll probably be there long after we're gone. And occasionally, just occasionally, they remind us of that fact in the most dramatic way possible. The moment you cross the threshold from open water into a whale's mouth, your body knows something is catastrophically wrong. Before your brain even has time to process what's happening, your body launches into full-scale emergency mode. It's like every alarm system you have goes off at once. Within 2 seconds, adrenaline floods your bloodstream at levels 100 times higher than normal. Your heart, which was probably beating at a calm 60 or 70 beats per minute while you were swimming, suddenly spikes to 200 beats per minute or more. Your pupils dilate completely, desperately trying to gather any available light in what has become absolute darkness. But here's the cruel irony of this panic response. Everything your body is doing to try to save you is actually making your situation worse. That massive surge of adrenaline, it burns through oxygen at an incredible rate. Your racing heart, it's demanding more oxygen than your lungs can possibly provide. Your body is essentially consuming its survival resources at exactly the moment when those resources are most precious. In normal circumstances, a person can hold their breath for maybe 2 to 3 minutes. Navy SEALs and freediving champions can stretch that to 4 or 5 minutes with training. But inside a whale's mouth, with your heart hammering and adrenaline coursing through your system, that window shrinks to about 90 seconds before you start losing consciousness, and that's assuming you can actually hold your breath at all. The darkness inside a whale's mouth isn't like any darkness you've ever experienced. It's not like being in a dark room where your eyes gradually adjust and you start making out shapes. This is absolute, complete darkness. No light has ever reached these places. No photon has ever bounced off these surfaces. Your pupils can dilate as wide as they want. There's simply nothing to see, but your body doesn't understand this. Your pupils keep trying, straining to gather light that doesn't exist. Meanwhile, your brain is trying to process spatial information from organs that are completely overwhelmed. The result is a kind of sensory panic that adds to your terror. Then the pressure hits. At just 20 feet underwater, water pressure doubles compared to what you experience at the surface. Your body can handle that. Humans are surprisingly adaptable to pressure changes when they happen gradually. But inside a feeding whale's mouth, you're not dealing with gradual pressure changes. You're dealing with sudden, massive spikes as thousands of gallons of water rush around you. During a lunge feeding event, when a whale opens its mouth and engulfs everything in its path, water pressure can spike to 60 psi or higher in seconds. To put that in perspective, your car tires are inflated to about 32 psi. Imagine having twice that pressure pressing against every square inch of your body all at once. Your sinuses, which are basically air-filled cavities in your skull, compress immediately. The pain is excruciating, like the worst sinus headache you've ever had, multiplied by 10. Your eardrums, which are designed to handle the gentle pressure changes you experience when driving up a mountain or taking off in an airplane, reach their breaking point at just 3 atmospheres of pressure. Inside a whale's mouth, you could be dealing with 20 atmospheres. The rupture happens with a distinctive popping sound that you hear inside your skull. It's not like breaking a balloon, it's more like tearing wet paper. First one eardrum goes, then the other. Blood vessels in your nose burst from the pressure, and you taste copper as blood flows down your throat. But the real danger is what's happening to your lungs. Each breath you take, if you can manage to take a breath at all, delivers no oxygen. Instead, you're inhaling a toxic cocktail of methane, carbon dioxide, and hydrogen sulfide from decomposing fish. This isn't just bad air. This is actively poisonous air that your body can't process. One full breath of this mixture causes immediate disorientation. Your brain, already starved for oxygen and flooded with adrenaline, starts shutting down non-essential functions. Your vision, already useless in the darkness, begins to tunnel. Your hearing, already damaged by the pressure, becomes muffled and distant. 2 breaths bring unconsciousness. The gas mixture inside a whale's mouth is unlike anything in the human experience. Imagine the worst-smelling thing you've ever encountered: rotting fish, sewage, swamp gas, and multiply that by 1,000. Then add the choking, suffocating sensation of carbon dioxide poisoning and the neurological effects of hydrogen sulfide toxicity. Michael Packard described it as a smell so overwhelming that it was almost a physical force. Not just unpleasant, actively nauseating in a way that made his body convulse even while he was fighting for his life. Your gag reflex triggers immediately, but you can't afford to vomit because you need every bit of airspace in your lungs. And then there's the heat. Most people think of the ocean as cold, and they're right. Even in tropical waters, the ocean temperature rarely gets above 80 degrees Fahrenheit. But inside a whale's body, you're dealing with mammalian body temperature, 97 to 99 degrees Fahrenheit. That might not sound too bad until you factor in the humidity. Inside a whale's mouth, humidity approaches 100%. Every surface is wet, every breath is saturated with moisture, and your body's natural cooling system, sweating, becomes completely useless. The combination of heat and humidity makes it feel like 120 degrees or more. Sweat pours out of every pore, but it can't evaporate in the saturated air. Your body temperature starts climbing immediately, and heat exhaustion sets in within minutes. Meanwhile, you're being pressed against the whale's tongue. A whale's tongue is not like a human tongue. We're talking about a muscle that weighs up to 3 tons in large species, roughly the weight of 2 cars. The surface feels like wet sandpaper, covered in thick mucus that makes everything slippery and impossible to grip. Every time the whale tries to swallow, and remember, swallowing is an automatic reflex when something is in your mouth, that massive tongue presses against you with incredible force. It's like being squeezed by a living hydraulic press covered in slime. If you somehow manage to avoid being crushed by the tongue, if you somehow find yourself being pushed toward the back of the mouth, you face the whale's throat. In species like sperm whales, the throat opening can be 20 inches wide, plenty big enough for a human body. But here's where the real nightmare begins. The esophagus, the tube that leads from the mouth to the stomach, contracts in waves called peristalsis. These are the same muscular contractions that move food through your digestive system, but scaled up to whale proportions. Each wave of contraction squeezes with about 800 pounds of pressure per square foot. To put that in perspective, a typical hydraulic car jack produces about 2,000 pounds of pressure total. The whale's esophagus is squeezing you with nearly half that force across every square foot of your body, over and over again, pushing you inexorably toward the stomach. No human has ever survived being swallowed past this point. But even if you avoid the throat, even if you stay in the mouth cavity, your body is fighting a losing battle against multiple forms of damage happening simultaneously. The pressure is crushing your sinuses and rupturing your eardrums. The toxic gases are poisoning your blood and shutting down your brain. The heat and humidity are pushing you toward heat stroke. The whale's tongue is threatening to crush you with every movement, and all of this is happening in complete darkness. While you're trying not to panic, trying to figure out some way to survive something that seems utterly unsurvivable, your blood oxygen levels plummet. Without fresh oxygen coming in, and with your body burning through its reserves at an incredible rate, you have maybe 90 seconds before your brain starts shutting down non-essential functions. Your vision tunnels, though in the darkness it doesn't matter. Your hearing becomes distant and muffled. Your thoughts become sluggish and confused, but here's what's remarkable about the human survival instinct. Even in these impossible circumstances, even when everything seems hopeless, your body keeps fighting. Your brain keeps working, looking for any possible way out. Your muscles keep responding, even when they're being crushed and poisoned and overheated. The people who survive these encounters all describe the same thing: a moment of absolute clarity in the middle of the chaos. A second when their training or instincts or pure determination cuts through the panic and shows them what they need to do. For Michael Packard, it was pushing against the whale's mouth with both hands, making himself as irritating as possible to his unwilling host. For Rainer Schimpf, it was staying absolutely still, knowing that whales typically spit out foreign objects quickly if they don't struggle. But that moment of clarity only comes after your body has already endured trauma that would be considered severe under any other circumstances. Ruptured eardrums, burst blood vessels, poisoning from toxic gases, crushing pressure injuries, heat exhaustion. These are the kinds of injuries that would send someone to the emergency room under normal conditions. Inside a whale's mouth, they're just the beginning. The remarkable thing is that the human body can endure this kind of abuse, even briefly. We're tougher than we think, more resilient than we imagine. But we're also incredibly fragile when placed in environments we never evolved to handle. A whale's mouth is one of those environments. It's a place where every system in your body is pushed beyond its limits simultaneously. It's a place where survival isn't just about holding your breath or staying calm. It's about your body's ability to function while being systematically destroyed by forces it has no defense against, and yet somehow some people live through it. They emerge from that darkness damaged but alive, traumatized but conscious, forever changed by an experience that pushes the boundaries of what the human body can endure. Their survival isn't just luck. It's a testament to the incredible resilience built into every human being, the backup systems and emergency protocols that kick in when everything else fails. It's proof that even in the most impossible circumstances, life finds a way to persist. But it's also a reminder of just how alien and hostile the ocean can be to human life. We've spent thousands of years learning to survive on land, but the ocean operates by completely different rules. Inside a whale's mouth, those rules become brutally clear. You're not the predator here. You're not even really prey. You're just an accident, a mistake, something that ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. And your survival depends entirely on the whale's biology working in your favor, on reflexes and instincts that evolved millions of years before humans ever existed. That's what makes these survival stories so incredible. They're not just tales of human endurance. They're glimpses into a world where we have no control, no advantages, no special claim to survival. They're reminders that despite all our technology and knowledge, we're still just visitors in the ocean. And sometimes that ocean reminds us of our place in the most dramatic way possible. 50 million years ago, in what is now Pakistan, a wolf-sized creature called Pakicetus hunted along the muddy banks of ancient rivers. It had 4 legs, a long tail, and sharp teeth designed for catching fish. If you saw one, you might think it was just another land mammal trying to make a living near the water. You would never guess that this unlikely creature was about to begin one of the most remarkable evolutionary journeys in the history of life on Earth. Pakicetus was the first whale. Not a whale as we know them today, obviously, but the beginning of something that would eventually become the largest animals ever to exist on our planet. Over the next 10 million years, these river hunters began spending more and more time in the water. Their nostrils gradually migrated from the tips of their snouts to the tops of their heads, becoming blowholes. Their front legs evolved into flippers. Their back legs disappeared entirely, but the most dramatic change was size. By 20 million years ago, the first true giants had appeared. These weren't the massive filter feeders we know today. They were still hunters, still using teeth to catch individual prey. But they had discovered something revolutionary. The ocean could support animals far larger than anything possible on land. On land, there are physical limits to how big you can get. Your legs have to support your weight against gravity. Your heart has to pump blood upward to your brain. Your skeleton has to bear enormous stresses every time you move. But in the ocean, water supports your weight. You can grow as large as your food supply will allow. And the ocean's food supply turned out to be virtually unlimited. The key breakthrough came when some whale lineages discovered filter feeding. Instead of chasing down individual fish or squid, they learned to engulf millions of tiny prey organisms all at once. This might seem like a step down, eating smaller prey instead of larger prey, but the math is incredible. A single blue whale can consume 4 tons of krill in one day. 4 tons! That's 8,000 pounds of food, processed through one of the most efficient feeding systems ever evolved. The energy return on this strategy is so favorable that it allowed whales to become the largest animals ever to exist, dwarfing even the biggest dinosaurs. But filter feeding required a complete redesign of the whale body plan. The teeth had to go, replaced by baleen, long, flexible plates made of keratin that hang from the upper jaw like curtains. The throat had to become expandable, stretching to hold thousands of gallons of water. The mouth had to become enormous to maximize the volume of water engulfed with each feeding lunge. Modern baleen whales are living examples of biological engineering at its finest. Take a blue whale's feeding system. It's like nothing else in nature. Those baleen plates, up to 400 on each side of the mouth, create a filtering system that can capture prey as small as rice grains, while processing 17,000 gallons of water in under a minute. Think about that for a second. 17,000 gallons! That's enough water to fill a swimming pool, and the whale squeezes it all out through its baleen in less than 60 seconds. The physics involved are staggering. The water pressure, the filtering efficiency, the muscular coordination required to make it all work. But the really mind-blowing part is the precision. A blue whale feeding on krill can selectively target the densest patches of prey, while avoiding areas with lower concentrations. They're not just swimming around with their mouths open, hoping to catch something. They're actively hunting, using sophisticated strategies to maximize their energy intake. Scientists have tracked blue whales as they dive deep to find krill swarms, then execute perfectly timed feeding lunges that capture the maximum number of prey with minimum energy expenditure. It's like watching a biological computer calculate the optimal solution to an incredibly complex problem in real time. Meanwhile, the toothed whales, the Odontocetes, took a completely different evolutionary path. Instead of getting bigger to eat smaller prey, they developed the most sophisticated sensory system in the animal kingdom, echolocation. 25 million years ago, some whale lineages began producing clicks and listening to the echoes. At first, this was probably just a simple way to navigate in murky water. But over millions of years, it evolved into something that makes our most advanced sonar systems look primitive. A sperm whale can produce clicks that reach 230 decibels. To put that in perspective, a rocket launch produces about 180 decibels. These whale clicks are among the loudest sounds produced by any animal, and they serve as biological sonar that can penetrate half a mile through pitch-black water. But it's not just about volume. The clicks travel through water at about 4 times the speed of sound in air, creating detailed 3-dimensional maps of everything around the whale. They can detect a basketball-sized object from 3,000 feet away. They can distinguish between different types of fish based on the acoustic properties of their swim bladders. They can even echolocate inside other animals, seeing internal structures like a biological X-ray machine. The brain processing required for this is almost incomprehensible. Imagine being blind and navigating through a complex environment using only sound. Except you can also see inside objects, determine their density and composition, track multiple moving targets simultaneously, and do it all while swimming at high speed through 3-dimensional space. Sperm whales do this effortlessly. Their brains have specialized regions for processing echolocation data that don't exist in any other mammals. They've essentially evolved a new form of perception that we can barely understand, let alone replicate. And these are the whales that can swallow humans. Sperm whales are perfectly designed predators. Their massive heads, which can be 1/3 of their total body length, contain the largest brain of any animal that has ever lived. That brain weighs up to 17 pounds and contains structures we're only beginning to understand. But it's their mouths that make them truly formidable. Unlike baleen whales, sperm whales have teeth, up to 50 massive conical teeth that can be 8 inches long and weigh 2 pounds each. These aren't teeth for chewing. They're teeth for grabbing and holding prey that might be 30 feet long and fighting for its life. Their primary prey is giant squid, creatures that live in the deepest parts of the ocean and can grow larger than school buses. The battles between sperm whales and giant squid take place in absolute darkness, thousands of feet below the surface. And they're some of the most dramatic predator-prey interactions on the planet. Sperm whales dive deeper than any other whale, who down to 7,000 feet or more, and hold their breath for up to 2 hours while hunting. They navigate through this alien environment using echolocation, track down squid that are actively trying to escape, and then engage in battles that can last for hours. The squid fight back with hooks and suckers that leave permanent scars on the whale's skin. Scientists can read a sperm whale's life history in these scars. Each set of marks tells the story of another epic battle in the deep ocean. Some old bulls are covered in hundreds of these scars, evidence of decades spent hunting the most elusive prey in the ocean. But here's what's really remarkable about sperm whales. Despite being perfectly designed predators, despite having teeth like railroad spikes and bite force that can crush steel, they almost never show aggression toward humans. The stories of whale attacks on ships like the Essex are incredibly rare exceptions, not the norm. Most of the time, sperm whales are curious about humans rather than hostile. Divers have reported whales approaching them slowly, using echolocation to examine them from head to toe, then simply swimming away. It's like being scanned by an alien intelligence that's trying to figure out what you are. This intelligence extends far beyond hunting and navigation. Sperm whales have complex social structures that scientists are only beginning to understand. They live in family groups led by older females, with young males leaving to form bachelor pods when they reach maturity. They have distinct dialects. Different populations produce different patterns of clicks that serve as acoustic signatures. Even more fascinating, they appear to have cultural traditions passed down through generations. Certain hunting techniques, migration routes, and even social behaviors seem to be learned rather than instinctive. Young whales spend years learning from their mothers and other family members, acquiring skills that can't be encoded in DNA. The same intelligence that makes sperm whales such effective predators also makes them incredibly aware of their environment. When Michael Packard found himself inside that humpback whale's mouth, the whale's response, surfacing quickly and opening wide to release him, wasn't just instinct. It was a decision made by an intelligent creature that recognized something was wrong. All whales, whether they're filter feeders or hunters, possess this kind of environmental awareness. They can distinguish between different types of objects in their mouths based on size, texture, movement patterns, and probably dozens of other factors we don't even understand. This is why most whale encounters with humans end with the whale trying to avoid contact rather than pursuing it. Whales recognize that humans aren't part of their normal environment. We're anomalies, curiosities, something that doesn't fit into their usual patterns of behavior, but occasionally, just occasionally, those patterns break down. A whale focused on feeding doesn't notice the human swimmer until it's too late. A hunting whale mistakes a small boat for prey. A whale simply makes the same kind of mistake that any intelligent creature can make when dealing with an unfamiliar situation. When these encounters happen, when a human ends up inside a whale's mouth, we get a glimpse into a world that operates by completely different rules. We experience firsthand what it's like to be completely outmatched by intelligence and power that evolved along pathways we can barely comprehend. But we also see something else, evidence of the restraint and awareness that these creatures normally show toward us. The fact that anyone survives being swallowed by a whale is testament to the whale's intelligence, not just the human's luck. These aren't mindless eating machines. They're sophisticated, aware, intelligent creatures that have been perfecting their survival strategies for 50 million years. when they choose to release a human rather than swallow them. It's a decision made by minds that we're only beginning to understand. The more we learn about whale intelligence, whale behavior, and whale biology, the more remarkable these survival stories become. They're not just tales of human endurance, they're examples of interspecies communication at the most basic level. A whale recognizing that something doesn't belong and choosing to correct the mistake. In those moments of release, when a whale opens its mouth and lets a human escape, we see something profound about the nature of intelligence itself. These creatures, whose minds evolved along completely different pathways from ours, can still recognize the value of life and make decisions that prevent unnecessary death. That recognition, that moment of mutual understanding between human and whale, might be the most remarkable part of these stories. It suggests that intelligence, regardless of how it evolves, tends toward awareness and restraint rather than mindless destruction, and that gives us hope for the future of our relationship with these ocean giants. Your first instinct inside a whale's mouth, the one that feels most natural, most human, is exactly the wrong thing to do. Every fiber of your being screams at you to thrash wildly, to fight with everything you have, to kick and punch and struggle against the impossible situation you found yourself in. Don't do it. That violent, panicked movement, that desperate flailing that seems like your only hope, actually triggers the whale's swallowing reflex. It's like pushing the one button you absolutely cannot push. The whale's nervous system interprets your struggling as the movement of injured prey, and it responds exactly the way millions of years of evolution have programmed it to respond. It tries to swallow you. This is one of the cruelest ironies of whale encounters. Your body's natural panic response, the fight or flight mechanism that has kept humans alive for thousands of years, becomes your worst enemy. Everything your instincts tell you to do will make your situation worse. Michael Packard figured this out in those terrifying 40 seconds inside the humpback whale's mouth. His first impulse was to struggle to fight his way out, but somehow, and he still doesn't know how, he forced himself to do something different. Instead of thrashing around like wounded prey, he pushed against the whale's mouth with both hands, creating steady, consistent pressure. Think about that for a second. While he's in absolute darkness, while he's running out of air, while every alarm in his body is telling him he's about to die, Michael makes a conscious decision to work against his panic. He turns himself into an irritant instead of prey, and it worked. The whale's mouth contains thousands of nerve endings designed to detect exactly these kinds of sensations. When something feels wrong, too large, too hard, wrong texture, wrong movement pattern, those nerves send urgent signals to the whale's brain. The message is clear. This doesn't belong here. Rainer Schimpf, the photographer who was swallowed by the bride's whale, took the opposite approach but based on the same principle. Instead of creating pressure, he held perfectly still. He made himself completely passive, like a piece of debris rather than a living creature. Both strategies work for the same reason. They make the human feel alien to the whale. They break the pattern of what the whale expects food to feel like. Whales have been eating for millions of years. They know what their prey feels like, how it moves, how it responds to being captured. When something doesn't fit that pattern, their instinct is to get rid of it. But understanding this intellectually and actually doing it when you're inside a whale's mouth are two completely different things. The psychological pressure is almost as overwhelming as the physical pressure. You're in absolute darkness, you can't breathe. You're being crushed by forces beyond your comprehension, and every instinct you have is screaming at you to panic. The people who survive these encounters all describe the same thing. A moment when training or determination or pure stubbornness cuts through the terror. For Michael Packard, it was his years of experience as a commercial diver. He'd been in dangerous situations before, situations where panic could kill you. He knew how to force himself to think clearly when everything was going wrong. For Rainer Schimpf, it was his knowledge of marine biology. He understood whale behavior well enough to know that struggling would make things worse. Even in the midst of the most terrifying experience of his life, he was able to apply what he knew about these creatures. But knowledge and training only get you so far. Ultimately, survival comes down to a kind of mental toughness that most people never discover they have until they're tested in the most extreme circumstances. Time is your greatest enemy in these situations. Without fresh air, brain damage begins at 4 minutes. But inside a whale's mouth, with its toxic atmosphere and crushing pressure, that window shrinks dramatically. You have maybe 90 seconds of useful consciousness before your brain starts shutting down non-essential functions. 90 seconds to overcome your panic. 90 seconds to figure out what's happening and respond appropriately. 90 seconds to do something that will convince the whale to release you instead of swallowing you. It sounds impossible, but the whale's biology actually works in your favor if you can stay calm enough to take advantage of it. Whales have incredibly sensitive mouths because they need to be able to distinguish between different types of prey, between food and non-food items, between things that are safe to swallow and things that might cause problems. Their mouths are like biological testing laboratories, equipped with nerve endings that can detect texture, temperature, movement patterns, chemical signatures, and probably dozens of other factors we don't understand. This sensitivity evolved to help them survive in an environment where eating the wrong thing could be fatal. In the deep ocean, whales sometimes encounter objects that could damage their digestive systems. Rocks, pieces of metal, large bones from previous meals. Their mouths have evolved to detect these dangerous items and reject them before they cause internal damage. When a human ends up in a whale's mouth, we trigger many of the same warning signals as these dangerous objects. We're too large, too hard, too foreign. We don't taste right, we don't move right, we don't feel right. Everything about us screams mistake to the whale's sensory system. The key is making sure you trigger the right responses. Moving like injured prey triggers the swallowing reflex. Moving like a foreign object triggers the ejection reflex. The difference between these two responses can literally be the difference between life and death. Humpback whales, like the one that swallowed Michael Packard, have an additional advantage for human survival. They're filter feeders that often surface with their mouths open for several seconds during feeding. This behavior, called bubble net feeding, creates natural escape windows. When a humpback whale performs this feeding technique, it dives below a school of fish and releases a spiral of bubbles that confuses and concentrates the prey. Then it swims up through the middle of this bubble net, with its mouth wide open, engulfing everything in its path. At the surface, the whale has to process all that water and separate the fish from the seawater. This process requires the whale to keep its mouth open for several seconds, sometimes up to 10 or 15 seconds, while it squeezes the water out through its baleen plates. If you can survive the initial engulfment, if you can avoid being crushed by the whale's tongue or squeeze through the baleen, these surface moments give you a chance to escape. The whale's mouth becomes like a temporary air pocket, and if you're positioned correctly, you might find yourself able to breathe again. But even these supposedly safer encounters with filter-feeding whales can turn deadly quickly. The whale's tongue alone weighs up to 3 tons and moves with incredible force. Being pressed against the roof of the mouth by that tongue is like being squeezed by a living hydraulic press covered in sandpaper. Sperm whales present a different set of challenges and opportunities. Their throats are wide enough to swallow a human, which makes them more dangerous in one sense. But they're also much more selective about what they eat. Sperm whales are precision hunters that rely on echolocation to identify their prey before attacking. They know exactly what a giant squid feels like, sounds like, and tastes like. When something doesn't match that profile, when something human-sized and human-shaped ends up in their mouth, they usually recognize the mistake immediately. There's a documented case from Japan where a fisherman survived being partially swallowed by a sperm whale by jamming his knife into the whale's tongue. The pain caused the whale to thrash violently and spit him out. He floated unconscious for 20 minutes before being rescued, with severe pressure injuries but intact memories of his ordeal. His strategy was extreme, but it worked for the same reason that Michael Packard's pushing worked. It created enough discomfort to trigger the whale's rejection response. The whale's brain received a clear signal that something was very wrong, and it responded by getting rid of the problem as quickly as possible. But not everyone has a knife, and not everyone has the presence of mind to use one effectively while being crushed inside a whale's mouth. For most people, survival comes down to simpler strategies: making yourself large to avoid fitting down the throat, staying calm to conserve oxygen, and doing whatever you can to feel foreign rather than food-like. The psychological aspect of survival might be the most important factor of all. People who survive these encounters describe entering a state of hyperfocus, where fear gives way to determination. They stop thinking about dying and start thinking about problem solving. This mental shift isn't just philosophical, it has real physiological effects. When you stop panicking, your heart rate decreases and your oxygen consumption drops. You think more clearly and respond more effectively. You give yourself the best possible chance of triggering the whale's natural tendency to release foreign objects. But perhaps the most important factor in survival is understanding that the whale doesn't want to hurt you. These encounters are accidents, cases of mistaken identity, or simple bad timing. The whale is just as surprised as you are, and just as eager to resolve the situation. Whales have been dealing with foreign objects in their mouths for millions of years. They have well-developed reflexes for getting rid of things that don't belong. Your job, if you ever find yourself in this impossible situation, is to help those reflexes work in your favor. Stay calm, if you can. Make yourself feel as non-food-like as possible. Trust that the whale's biology is designed to solve exactly this kind of problem. And remember that every person who has survived being swallowed by a whale has done so because the whale chose to release them. That choice, that moment when an intelligent creature recognizes a mistake and corrects it, might be the most remarkable part of these survival stories. It represents a kind of interspecies understanding that transcends the terror of the moment. In those few seconds when the whale opens its mouth and lets you escape, you're experiencing something profound about the nature of intelligence and awareness. You're seeing evidence that even in the most alien circumstances, consciousness tends toward problem-solving rather than destruction. And that realization, that glimpse of shared intelligence across species lines, might be worth all the terror that came before it. In 1966, the blue whale population hit a number so low that it's almost impossible to comprehend. Fewer than 1,000 individuals remained from an original population of 350,000. Think about that for a moment. 350,000 blue whales once roamed our oceans, the largest animals ever to exist on Earth. Reduced to less than 1,000 survivors scattered across all the world's oceans. Commercial whaling had pushed these magnificent creatures to the very edge of extinction. For over a century, whaling ships had hunted them relentlessly, turning their massive bodies into lamp oil, margarine, and corset stays. The industrial efficiency of modern whaling was staggering. A single blue whale could yield up to 120 barrels of oil, making them incredibly valuable targets. But in 1966, something remarkable happened that would change everything. A marine biologist named Roger Payne lowered a hydrophone into the waters near Bermuda and recorded something that had never been heard by human ears. Before the songs of humpback whales, when those recordings were released to the public in 1967, they reached millions of people around the world. For the first time in human history, people heard whales not as resources or monsters, but as individuals. These haunting melodies, lasting up to 30 minutes and traveling thousands of miles underwater, revealed a level of complexity and beauty that no one had imagined. The songs changed everything. Suddenly, harpooning a whale felt less like harvesting a resource and more like silencing a voice. The public perception of whales transformed almost overnight from dangerous monsters or valuable commodities to intelligent, emotional beings worthy of protection. But the real transformation came with each new scientific discovery about whale intelligence and behavior. In 1970, researchers discovered that whales have spindle neurons, specialized brain cells previously found only in humans and great apes. These neurons are associated with emotions, social intelligence, and self-awareness. Suddenly, the idea of killing a whale felt uncomfortably close to committing murder. The evidence for whale intelligence kept mounting. Scientists discovered that whales have complex social structures, with family bonds that last for decades. They found evidence of cultural transmission, behaviors and techniques passed down through generations that couldn't be explained by instinct alone. They observed whales appearing to grieve for their dead, supporting injured family members, and engaging in what could only be described as play. Each discovery made the practice of commercial whaling seem more barbaric, more ethically indefensible. How could we justify killing creatures that mourned their dead, that had individual personalities, that created art in the form of song? By 1986, public pressure had become so intense that the International Whaling Commission was forced to implement a global moratorium on commercial whaling. The hunting that had driven whales to the brink of extinction was finally banned on an international scale. The results were nothing short of miraculous. Grey whale populations, which had dropped to just 300 individuals, rebounded to over 27,000. Humpback whales increased from 5,000 to more than 80,000. Even blue whales, the slowest to recover due to their massive size and slow reproduction rate, began showing signs of population growth. Each recovered whale became an ambassador for its species. Instead of fleeing from human contact, many whales began approaching whale-watching boats with curiosity. Humpback whales started displaying behaviors around humans that seemed almost playful, breaching near boats, spy-hopping to get a better look at their human observers, even appearing to pose for photographers. It was as if the whales understood that something fundamental had changed in their relationship with humans. The hunters had become protectors. The predators had become admirers, but the recovery of whale populations revealed something even more remarkable about these creatures: their crucial role in ocean ecosystems and global climate regulation. Scientists discovered what they called the whale pump, a biological process that fertilizes entire marine ecosystems. Here's how it works. Whales dive deep to feed in nutrient-rich waters, then return to the surface to breathe and defecate. This vertical movement brings nutrients from the deep ocean up to the sunlit surface waters where phytoplankton live. These microscopic plants form the base of the entire marine food web, and they also produce 50% of the oxygen we breathe. Without whales, these nutrients would remain trapped in the deep ocean. With whales, they're distributed throughout the water column, supporting massive blooms of phytoplankton that feed everything from tiny fish to massive filter feeders. The whales essentially act as biological elevators, moving nutrients vertically through the ocean in a way that benefits every living thing in the marine environment. The numbers are staggering. A single blue whale's lifetime captures and stores the equivalent carbon of thousands of trees. When scientists calculated what would happen if whale populations returned to their pre-whaling numbers, they found that restored whale populations could capture 1.7 billion tons of carbon dioxide annually. That's equivalent to taking 400 million cars off the road every year. Suddenly, whale conservation wasn't just about saving magnificent creatures. It was about saving ourselves. Our survival, our climate stability, our ability to maintain a habitable planet increasingly depends on the health of whale populations. But even as we've learned to appreciate whales' ecological importance, new threats have emerged. Climate change is warming the oceans and altering the distribution of prey species that whales depend on. Shipping traffic has increased dramatically, leading to more ship strikes and underwater noise pollution that interferes with whale communication. Plastic pollution has created a new kind of nightmare for whales. These filter feeders, which evolved to strain tiny prey from seawater, can't distinguish between krill and microplastics. Their stomachs are increasingly found to contain everything from fishing nets to grocery bags, plastic debris that their digestive systems can't process. And yet, even in the face of these new challenges, whales continue to show a remarkable capacity for adaptation and recovery. They're changing their migration routes to follow shifting prey populations. They're altering their communication patterns to deal with increased ocean noise. They're demonstrating the same intelligence and resilience that allowed them to survive 60 million years of evolution. Perhaps most remarkably, they continue to show curiosity and apparent friendliness toward humans, despite centuries of persecution. Whale watching has become a multi-billion-dollar industry precisely because whales seem to enjoy the interaction as much as humans do. There are documented cases of whales appearing to rescue humans in distress. Humpback whales have been observed lifting swimmers away from attacking sharks. Gray whales have pushed disabled boats toward shore. It's as if these creatures understand that the relationship between our species has fundamentally changed. The transformation in human attitudes toward whales might be one of the most dramatic shifts in environmental consciousness in human history. Within a single generation, we went from seeing whales as resources to be exploited to recognizing them as intelligent beings worthy of protection and respect. This shift offers hope for addressing other environmental challenges. If we can change our relationship with whales so dramatically, we can probably change our relationship with other aspects of the natural world as well. The key was making the connection between whale intelligence and human values. Once people heard whale songs, once they learned about whale families and whale emotions, once they understood that these creatures were more like us than different from us, protection became inevitable. The same process is happening with other species around the world. As we learn more about the intelligence of dolphins, elephants, great apes, and even octopuses, our ethical obligations toward these creatures become clearer. We're expanding our circle of moral concern to include beings that think and feel and experience the world in ways we're only beginning to understand. But whales remain special in this process because of their sheer magnificence. A blue whale's heart alone weighs as much as a small car. Its tongue weighs as much as an elephant. When you see one of these creatures in person, when you experience the reality of something that massive and graceful moving through the water, it changes your perspective on what's possible in the natural world. And when you realize that this magnificent creature is also intelligent, that it has emotions and relationships and possibly even a sense of self, the moral imperative for protection becomes overwhelming. The whale conservation movement has shown us something crucial about human nature. We are capable of changing our behavior dramatically when we understand what's at stake. We're capable of valuing life over profit, wonder over exploitation, long-term survival over short-term gain. The recovery of whale populations represents one of conservation's greatest success stories. It proves that even when a species is pushed to the brink of extinction, recovery is possible if we're willing to change our behavior and give these creatures the protection they need. Today's whales are ambassadors not just for their own species, but for the entire ocean ecosystem. They remind us that the health of the marine environment is intimately connected to our own survival. They show us that intelligence and consciousness come in forms we never expected, and that our ethical obligations extend far beyond our own species. Most importantly, they demonstrate that the relationship between humans and the natural world doesn't have to be one of domination and exploitation. It can be one of mutual respect, wonder, and shared survival on a planet that belongs to all of us. The whales that survived the era of commercial hunting are now swimming in oceans where they're protected, studied and celebrated rather than hunted. Their songs, which once went unheard by human ears, now inspire millions of people around the world to care about ocean conservation. And in those moments when a whale chooses to approach a human, when these two intelligent species meet in the medium that connects all life on Earth, we get a glimpse of what the future could look like. A world where humans and whales share the oceans as partners rather than predators and prey. That future is within our reach. The whales have shown us the way back from the brink of extinction. Now it's up to us to ensure that their recovery continues, and that the lessons we've learned from nearly losing them forever guide our relationship with the rest of the natural world. 20 years from now, you might slip on a virtual reality headset and experience exactly what Michael Packard felt inside that humpback whale's mouth. The crushing darkness, the overwhelming pressure, the toxic air, the massive tongue pressing against you, but without any of the actual danger. Japanese researchers are developing what they call empathy simulators that recreate whale encounters down to the smallest detail. Water pressure, sound vibrations, even the chemical composition of the air inside a whale's mouth, all of it can be simulated with technology that makes the experience feel completely real. The goal isn't just entertainment or education, though those are important. The real purpose is transformation. These simulators are designed to change how people think about marine life by letting them experience the ocean from perspectives they could never safely access in real life. Early results are remarkable. Children who experience virtual whale encounters show 70% higher conservation concern than those who only watch videos or read books about whales. Something about experiencing the sheer scale and power of these creatures firsthand, even in simulation, creates an emotional connection that traditional education methods can't match. But the most exciting developments are happening in the realm of communication. For decades, scientists have been trying to decode whale vocalizations, to understand what these complex songs and calls actually mean. Now, artificial intelligence is finally giving us the tools to crack the code. Project CETI, the Cetacean Translation Initiative, has set an ambitious goal: achieve two-way communication with sperm whales by 2030. Using machine learning algorithms trained on millions of whale vocalizations, researchers are beginning to identify patterns that suggest possible names, dialects, and cultural traditions passed through generations. Imagine the implications. Imagine being able to ask a whale about its life, its memories, its perspective on the relationship between our species. Imagine a whale being able to tell us about the deep ocean environments we've never seen, about the changes it has witnessed over its lifetime, about what it's like to experience the world through echolocation. Early results suggest that whales have far more complex communication systems than we ever imagined. Sperm whales appear to have regional dialects, with different populations using distinct patterns of clicks that serve as acoustic signatures. Even more remarkably, these dialects seem to be learned rather than inherited, passed down through cultural transmission from mothers to calves. Some researchers believe that whales may actually have names for individual members of their pods. Others think they might have different languages for different types of communication. One pattern for navigation, another for social bonding, yet another for coordinating hunting strategies. If these theories prove correct, we're on the verge of discovering that whale intelligence is even more sophisticated than we currently understand. We might find that these creatures have rich inner lives, complex social relationships, and cultural traditions that stretch back thousands of years. But communication technology works both ways. If we can understand whale vocalizations, we might also be able to communicate with them. Researchers are already experimenting with playing recorded whale calls back to wild populations and observing their responses. Some whales seem to recognize and respond to specific calls, suggesting that meaningful exchange might be possible. The implications extend far beyond scientific curiosity. If we can communicate with whales, we can warn them about dangers, ship traffic, military sonar, environmental hazards. We might be able to coordinate our activities with theirs, sharing the oceans more effectively, and reducing conflicts between human needs and whale behavior. This kind of communication might already be happening in limited ways. There are documented cases of whales seeming to understand and respond to human distress signals. Humpback whales have been observed approaching boats with engine trouble and staying nearby until help arrives, almost as if they recognize that the humans need assistance. But the future of human-whale interaction isn't just about technology and communication. It's also about geography and climate. Climate change is fundamentally altering ocean ecosystems, pushing whale-feeding grounds toward shores and into shipping lanes. The Cape Cod area where Michael Packard was swallowed now sees 10 times more humpback feeding activity than it did 20 years ago. Warming oceans are forcing whales to adapt their migration patterns, sometimes bringing them into closer contact with human activities than ever before. This creates both opportunities and challenges. More frequent whale encounters could lead to greater public awareness and appreciation for these creatures. But they also increase the risk of accidents, ship strikes, and fishing gear entanglements. Technology offers solutions to these challenges. Thermal imaging drones can now spot whales from 5 miles away, giving ships and fishing vessels advance warning to alter course or slow down. Artificial intelligence systems are being developed that can predict whale feeding areas days or even weeks in advance, allowing human activities to be planned around whale behavior rather than conflicting with it. Ships are already beginning to automatically reduce speed when whales are detected in the area. Some shipping companies are rerouting vessels around known whale migration corridors. These changes might seem small, but they represent a fundamental shift in how we think about sharing the oceans with other intelligent species. The future might also bring more intimate forms of connection between humans and whales. Advances in underwater breathing technology could allow people to swim alongside whales for extended periods, observing their behavior in ways that are currently impossible. Imagine spending hours underwater with a pod of sperm whales, watching them hunt giant squid in the deep ocean, experiencing their world from the inside. But perhaps the most profound changes will come from simply recognizing whales as individuals rather than as representatives of their species. Scientists are already developing photo identification databases that track individual whales throughout their lifetimes. These databases reveal that whales have distinct personalities, preferences, and behavioral patterns that persist for decades. Some whales are consistently curious about humans, approaching boats and divers repeatedly over many years. Others are more cautious, maintaining distance but observing human activities from afar. Still others seem completely indifferent to human presence, going about their lives as if we don't exist. These individual differences matter because they suggest that whales, like humans, are shaped by both genetics and experience. Their behavior toward humans might depend on their personal history, whether they've had positive or negative encounters with people in the past, whether they've learned to associate humans with food or danger or simple curiosity. This individuality has profound implications for conservation and management. Instead of treating all whales the same way, we might need to develop strategies that account for individual personalities and preferences. Some whales might benefit from close monitoring and protection, while others might prefer to be left alone. The technology for this kind of individualized management already exists. Genetic analysis can identify individual whales from small tissue samples. Satellite tags can track their movements in real time. Artificial intelligence can analyze their vocalizations and predict their behavior patterns. 20 years from now, we might have detailed profiles for thousands of individual whales, their family relationships, their migration patterns, their feeding preferences, their social connections, even their apparent moods and personality traits. We might know them as individuals in the same way we know our neighbors or colleagues, and they might know us too. There's growing evidence that whales remember individual humans across decades. Researchers have documented cases of whales approaching boats and appearing to recognize specific people they encountered as calves 30 or 40 years earlier. This kind of long-term recognition suggests that whales view humans as individuals rather than as an undifferentiated threat. They might have opinions about specific people, preferences for certain types of boats or research vessels, even emotional associations with particular humans who have played important roles in their lives. If this is true, then every human-whale encounter becomes part of a much larger relationship between our species. Each positive interaction builds trust and understanding. Each negative encounter creates fear and avoidance. We're not just sharing the oceans with whales, we're building relationships with them that could last for generations. The future of these relationships depends largely on how we choose to approach them. If we continue to see whales primarily as tourist attractions or research subjects, our interactions will remain superficial. But if we begin to recognize them as intelligent individuals with their own agency and preferences, we might develop something unprecedented, genuine friendship between species. This isn't just wishful thinking. There are already documented cases of long-term relationships between individual humans and individual whales. Researchers who have studied the same whale populations for decades report being recognized and apparently welcomed by whales they first encountered as students. Some whales seem to actively seek out interaction with specific humans, approaching their boats preferentially and displaying behaviors that appear playful or social rather than merely tolerant. These relationships suggest that whales are capable of forming emotional bonds with humans that persist across years or even decades. 20 years from now, these kinds of relationships might be common rather than exceptional. We might have whale ambassadors, individual animals that serve as bridges between our species, helping to build understanding and cooperation. We might have human whale specialists who are known and trusted by entire whale populations. The ancient nightmare of being swallowed by a whale might transform into tomorrow's dream of swimming alongside these magnificent creatures as respected partners in a shared ocean. The fear and misunderstanding that has characterized our relationship for centuries might give way to mutual recognition, respect, and cooperation. Two intelligent species, both trying to survive on a changing planet, both capable of learning and adaptation, both with something to offer the other. Humans with our technology and global perspective, whales with their deep knowledge of ocean systems and their role as ecosystem engineers. Together, we might be able to address challenges that neither species could handle alone. Climate change, ocean pollution, the collapse of marine ecosystems, these problems require solutions that work on a planetary scale. They require the kind of cooperation between species that has never existed before in Earth's history. The whales have already shown us they're capable of forgiveness, moving past centuries of hunting and persecution to approach humans with curiosity rather than fear. They've demonstrated their resilience, recovering from near extinction to reclaim their role as ocean giants. They've revealed their intelligence, their emotional complexity, their capacity for relationships that transcend species boundaries. Now it's our turn to prove ourselves worthy partners in this emerging relationship, to show that we can move beyond seeing whales as resources or obstacles or even just objects of scientific study, to demonstrate that we can recognize them as individuals, as equals, as fellow travelers on a planet that belongs to all of us. The future of human-whale relationships isn't predetermined. It will be shaped by the choices we make today, the technologies we develop, the values we choose to embrace. But if the past 50 years have taught us anything, it's that dramatic transformation is possible when we open our minds to new ways of thinking about other species. The whales are ready for this future. The question is whether we are too.